In recent years, I've become a pretty big fan of the Yakuza series, or the Like a Dragon series as it's known as nowadays. The release of Infinite Wealth was something I spent an unhealthy amount of time on in the last 2 weeks, and it did not disappoint. While I was extremely happy with Infinite Wealth, there was something, or rather someone, I thought was missing from the game. And to explain what I mean, we're gonna have to go back. Back to 2006 with the release of Yakuza 2 and the introduction of one of the series' most beloved characters, Ryuji Goda. Before I go any further though, just be warned that I will be delving into spoilers for these specific Yakuza games. So if you haven't played them before and care about spoilers for these games in particular, I would avoid this video for the time being. Ryuji Goda first appeared in Yakuza 2 as its main antagonist. He was specifically designed to be a direct rival to Kiryu, being dubbed the Dragon of Kansai. He's easily one of the most memorable antagonists in the series, partially for being one of the only other dragons Kiryu's fought. And I'm a big fan of characters like Ryuji, the violent brutes with a good heart, so I always liked him a lot. So it was a pretty sad moment to see him die after his final battle with Kiryu. Had he survived, he probably would have become a reoccurring character in some way. Despite only appearing in one game, Ryuji's popularity would extend well beyond Yakuza 2, as he would continue to place high in popularity polls well after 2's release. However, against all odds, Ryuji would return as one of the 4 playable characters in a spin-off game known as Yakuza Dead Souls, a zombie shooter spin-off. This game takes place in an alternate timeline from the main games, which I guess exists to explain the existence of zombies, but I don't know, the Yakuza series is so wacky and ridiculous that the idea that zombies just suddenly sprung up out of nowhere isn't really that far-fetched to me, but whatever. In this alternate timeline, Ryuji went on to survive his wounds from Yakuza 2. However, he would be expelled from the Omni Alliance, lose his arm, and end up working as a takoyaki chef in Komorocho. He would also now be fit with a gun arm like Barret from Final Fantasy VII. It's pretty cool to finally get the chance to play as Ryuji, even if it's not in the form that I would like. And it's nice to see him and Kiryu on friendly terms and even work together. Although it's not canon, it's an interesting insight into what could have been had Ryuji lived. Ryuji's likeness would also be used for the character Saigo in Yakuza Ishin. Although it's obviously not him, it was cool to see him in a role again. A 12-year-old Ryuji would also make a cameo appearance in Yakuza 0 as a pants thief during one of Majima's sub-stories. This quest really confused me when I first played the game because at the time I had no idea who Ryuji was, so I just assumed he was another no-name one-off character. Little did I know that I was beating up an adolescent version of one of the most beloved characters in the franchise. Finally, Ryuji would reprise his role as Yakuza Kiwami 2's main antagonist. Although this game is just a remake of 2, so I'm not sure how much that counts really for anything, but it was great to see him and Koryu back in a Dragon Engine game. Give them both one last moment in the spotlight. Now, Kiwami 2 does indeed mark the last official appearance of Ryuji in a mainline game. So you might be wondering, what else is there to talk about? Ryuji died, right? Well, strap in, because there's a lot to talk about here. The release of Yakuza Like a Dragon marked a new beginning for the series, with a complete overhaul to the gameplay that came with an entirely new cast of characters, essentially making it a new entry point for the series. Some old fan-favorite characters do make appearances throughout the game, such as Majima, Daigo, Saejima, and of course Kiryu. However, these characters showing up isn't too surprising. What was surprising, however, was the reappearance of 2 specific characters. Kashiwagi, a reoccurring character in the first 3 Yakuza games who had been presumed dead since Yakuza 3, and Lau Ka Long, another character who had been presumed dead since Yakuza 3. These 2 characters had been deceased for a decade until Like a Dragon decided to bring them back, and the reactions to both of these were pretty all over the place. Because really, the idea that these 2 had survived their injuries is a pretty big stretch. This bizarre retcon started to make people wonder, if these 2 characters were still alive, who else was out there? Back on the subject of Ryuji specifically though, he would end up getting his own special character story in Yakuza Online, complete with a trailer for the announcement. However, this story did not confirm that he was alive, as it takes place 6 years before the events of Yakuza 2. Interestingly, Ryuji isn't alone on this adventure as he is joined by Jungi Han. This actually makes this the earliest known Jungi Han in the series. Kiryu doesn't meet any Jungi Han until Yakuza 6, with Ichiban later meeting a third one in Yakuza Like a Dragon, with it being implied that there's significantly more than the 3 we've seen. Probably my favorite thing about Ryuji's campaign, aside from cameos like Shinada from Yakuza 5 and Zero's Kuze, is his final boss, which ends up being Jin Goda, Ryuji's adoptive father, who by the time we see him in Yakuza 2 is completely wheelchair bound. The last 6 years must have hit him pretty hard. If you want to read a full breakdown and translation of his story, check out this blog by Dojima Dragon's Girl. Huge shoutouts to them for archiving and translating this stuff for us Western fans. Okay, now this is where things start getting weird. Early 2021, a few images surfaced on 4chan claiming to be from a new Yakuza spin-off starring Ryuji Goda, with the story being based on his adventures in Yakuza Online. Now on the surface, it would seem that these are fake, as it's been 3 years with no mention of any Ryuji spin-off. However, there are a few interesting things about this leak. A lot of the menus they show off in these images are identical to what we've seen from RGG Studios. Now, it is more likely that this was fake, however, I still thought it was worth mentioning. It's not exactly clear if these images are real and just some kind of test or something, so let me know if you have any thoughts in the comments. Alright, now for things to get even weirder. Like a Dragon Gaiden, another spin-off meant to bridge the gap between 7 and 8, has a lot of interesting references to Ryuji. Partway through the game, Kiryu ends up going through a gauntlet of fights referencing his past battles in Yakuza 1 and 2, culminating in a battle with a Ryuji lookalike, with the announcer stating that Ryuji disappeared, implying that nobody knows what happened to him. Not only that, but one of the game's side quests involves a group of people claiming to be Ryuji Goda. Kiryu even reacts to a bunch of them with these little fake outs, but like the boss fight, none of these are actually Ryuji himself. Lastly, the demo of Infinite Wealth included as a bonus in Like a Dragon Gaiden had a weird revelation to it, although not one related to Ryuji himself. Instead, it has to do with another character who had long been presumed dead, once again from Yakuza 3. Richardson, a major antagonist in Yakuza 3, was seemingly killed by Mia to save Kiryu and Daigo by dragging them both off the roof of the hospital they were on. However, here he is more than a decade later, alive and well, running a bar in Hawaii. There's not really a good explanation for how he survived the fall, and it makes Mine's whole sacrifice kind of pointless. What makes this even stranger is that Kiryu somehow doesn't seem to recognize the guy. The reason I feel like it's important to bring this up is that, again, if this guy somehow survived the fall from Yakuza 3, then who's to say Ryuji couldn't survive a couple bullet wounds? I mean, if Lau somehow survived getting shot in the head, then what's to say Ryuji couldn't survive getting hit by a few bullets? But for me, probably the most damning piece of evidence appeared shortly after Gaiden's release. So Sega actually held a mock funeral service for various characters who died throughout the series. They even have a little place where you can leave flowers for your favorite deceased character. Now there are some characters excluded here due to the fact that they don't have the rights to use the actors' likenesses. However, there's one exclusion that doesn't follow this rule, and that's Ryuji. As far as I can tell, nowhere during the event is anything related to Ryuji shown, despite the fact that the character has been at least believed to be deceased for years now. Again, Ryuji's face isn't based on someone. They don't have any restrictions for when they can and can't show him. They just decided not to for some reason, which really leaves a lot of questions. Lastly, and an extremely light spoiler for Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, but if you care about it, please skip to this point in the video. One of Kiryu's memoirs near Komorocho Hill explicitly talks about Ryuji, and in it, he states that he feels like Ryuji could just appear out of nowhere one day, which again is just an extremely bizarre thing to say to me. Now aside from this one mention, Ryuji does not appear in this game in any way. And as I alluded to earlier in the video, I did really expect him to show up at some point, but he never does. Now, at this point, I honestly don't know what's going on with Ryuji anymore. Is he alive? Will he reappear in the next Like a Dragon? Will he be a party member? I really don't know at this point, but it honestly feels like they've been leading up to something involving Ryuji, so maybe we'll find out something about him in the next game. It just feels like they've been teasing the return of the big man himself for a while, but it's been driving me mad to even figure out in what way he would return. Infinite Wealth being likely Kiryu's last game would have already made it a perfect fit for Ryuji's appearance. I'm really curious what other people think. Are you in the Ryuji is alive boat? Or do you think he's deader than dead? Either way, I hope you enjoyed this little video I made. I just really needed to talk about this because it's been driving me insane. The more I look into this dragon abyss, the more the dragon looks back at me.